My name is John Griffioen. We're at the Fort Worth Zoo, and I am the Assistant Director for Animal Programs and Conservation.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so it is officially our second week in a row at the Fort Worth Zoo, and now we're bringing you a brand new guest, Dr. John Griffioen, and we talk about all kinds of things. This is one of those freewheeling interviews where we end up talking about not only animals and exhibits and stuff like that, but also leadership and, what it means to find the right place and find ways to combine your passions into maybe unique positions. And I don't know, just all kinds of stuff. It was two people named John who really were just enjoying chatting with each other. And of course, as y'all know, I love bringing the PR people into the episode. So you will hear a little bit of Avery, who set these interviews up. And I had to, not let her just be a silent observer. So yeah, it's just another really fun trip to the Fort Worth Zoo, and there's a lot of food for thought in this one about all different sides of the zoological industry and what it means to be a person in it. So we'll get to that in a minute, but before we do, quick reminder that you should hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Every Tuesday we do interviews, every Friday we do Zoo News. Make sure that you are following along on the socials at Rossifari and on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And make sure that you don't get two really playful dogs and then have them hanging out in the room that you're recording in if you're a podcaster, because you can probably hear Buzz and Flam just tearing it up next to me. But hey, what's an animal podcast without some animals, right? So with all of that said, I think it is time to head on back to the Fort Worth Zoo. Enjoy, y'all.
That's a very cool title. What does that mean?
That's a great question. So that is for our animal department. So that's pretty much covers anyone that works directly with the animals. So that includes everyone that works within husbandry, or what we would consider zookeepers, and our management staff. And then our veterinary department, our nutrition department, and our conservation biologists.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. Can you tell me all of their names? No, I'm kidding.
Almost, yes.
No, but so let's start off by how did you get to where you are? Because it's pretty impressive, and you seem like a relatively young individual. What has your path been?
That's a great question. I am actually trained as a veterinarian.
Okay. All the best people are. I'm married to a vet.
No bias.
None
I
at all.
agree. I grew up in Michigan and had always loved going to the Binder Park Zoo.
Yes.
I worked in education there for a while and just fell in love with it. It's still one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. I did overnight camps. I got to sleep at the zoo and they paid me.
That's amazing.
That's kind of the best gig.
Yeah.
And from there, I always knew that I was drawn to science. I really loved the connection of health and how basic biology connects to well-being, and wanted to do that for animals, not people. So I've wanted to be a veterinarian as long as I can remember. At least kindergarten is what I was telling my parents. And so
awesome.
Then I went to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, very cold, to Lake Superior State University. Really small university, loved it. Got a lot of really great hands-on science experience. And from there, went to North Carolina State University for vet school.
Nice.
Which is a great school.
Yeah.
Really strong zoo and aquatic program. And I knew that's the direction I wanted to go as a vet. And had a great time, did all kinds of fun things with turtle rescue team, got involved with some wildlife rehab, which was really rewarding. They have a red wolf program, just some really cool opportunities. And then from there, I did an internship at the Mystic Aquarium in Connecticut.
Very cool.
Loved it. And then went to the Indianapolis Zoo for another internship, also amazing. And that sort of melded the aquatic side of things with the zoo side. And from there, I actually came straight
pause
here.
before you go on. Were the walruses there when you got
the walruses were there. I love walruses.
I love walruses.
Yes.
So I've done a couple episodes at Indy, and one was with walruses. And out of all of the animals that I've gotten to meet and spend time with, I'm not saying they're top of the list, but if not, they're darn close. And it was like, what magical little weirdos.
Magical.
Just amazing.
They are.
Little isn't the right word, but yes. But
yeah, they're incredible.
Yeah.
Walrus are, one of the coolest species I've worked with.
That's
for sure.
So cool.
Really
awesome.
Cool.
And then you came to Fort Worth.
And then I came to Fort Worth.
All right.
And I started as an associate veterinarian and did that for a few years. And then just recently moved into this position about a year ago now.
Okay. Very cool. I'm curious, something I've never really asked on this podcast before, because I've had a lot of vets on. Again, I'm biased, but also I have a great relationship with AAZV. They'll be at the conference in Toronto in 2 weeks, and it's always amazing covering that stuff. And how do you, I don't even know the best way to phrase this, but like when you work at a job, you get assessed, and obviously you got raised up to this incredible position that you're in now. How do you assess a veterinarian as far as like that kind of thing for like progress and like if you're doing a good job or not? How does the assessment process work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's different for everyone. So is it, how the facility is assessing, we look at the animal health program, and we have a phenomenal program here. And so that's looking at things like preventative health and how the collection of animals are managed in the best way. And so there are some metrics for that. But I think a lot of us internally also kind of measure ourselves on like, how are we successful? And what that looks like for everyone is very different. And so I think for me, I always gravitated towards the people side of the animal work, which is kind of interesting. I think a lot of people get into the field not necessarily like, I love working with people, I want to go work with animals all day, but it's so important. I mean, it's most of what we do. And so I kind of always gravitated towards that. So I think it was a natural fit. But then there's incredibly talented clinicians that are on clinics for their entire careers, and that's incredible, and we need them. So it kind of depends on the individual and what their goals are, what their measures of success would be.
That makes sense. That's fair. I do find it interesting that you knew that you didn't want to be a medical professional for people, but then once you got into the animal side, were fascinated by and connected to the people.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was?
I've always been drawn to animals and animal people. I think animal people are really amazing.
I weirdly do too.
Yeah. There's just such a level of compassion and dedication that goes into animal care that I'm not saying that doesn't exist in the human field. I just didn't feel that myself. Like I've always been drawn specifically to animals and animal people. But I do think there's a gap because of that, because a lot of people look at it as an animal job. And it is, but it's also a people job just as much. And so trying to bridge that a little bit more.
Very cool. I really like that. That's actually something that's been a big part of my experience doing this. I frequently talk to people who are not, the type of keepers that are out there. They're not education keepers every time. There are people who might be in the back of a herp building 98% of their time.
Yeah.
And, but in this world, in this modern world where we need to all educate and we all need to, team up with stakeholders for conservation and stuff, you really can't. There's that old stereotype of like the zookeeper who like didn't like people, so became a zookeeper, and you just can't be that anymore. And some of the facilities that I go to a lot as I'm traveling around have kind of started throwing some of their more animal-only keepers at me because they know I'm nice and I'm chill and I can keep it fun. But you need to get that experience of like doing the people thing. And
And even if you're not out talking to guests, like not everyone finds joy in that. And that's okay. But you still have a team of people that you work with.
Right.
And so that's just as important to be able to build those relationships, because you're more effective in your job if you have good working relationships. And so, not everyone is going to be out doing outreach presentations.
Yeah.
And some people are absolutely made for that, and you can tell. And some people are made to be in the back of the herp building. But again, there's people everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So talk to me a little bit about what your current role is, because it sounds massive.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Did you see the Colombian government is spending almost $4 million to relocate Pablo Escobar's hippos?
In Brazil, a school of piranha attacked and injured at least 8 people at a beach resort.
First fatal mountain lion attack in 20 years in California.
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You may have seen me on Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive or Shark Week. So join me and my friends as we break down animal news from around the world and discuss all things wildlife. Click here to unlock these animal mysteries.
Yeah. So currently, I assist our director of animal programs. So a lot of that is identifying and providing resources for our animal managers and everyone within that team. And, we're looking at big picture things like collection planning and new construction, but we're also looking at how can we best support the veterinary department? How can we best support our nutrition department? What are we looking at from a collection standpoint? And how do we drive new conservation projects forward? We're really fortunate that our animal managers are just phenomenally talented at that. So most of what we do is support them in that. But, making sure that those resources are available, that the opportunities are available to pursue some of those bigger picture things.
Okay.
And a lot of people. Yeah. There's a lot of people in our department.
Yeah. So what was that transition like for you? Because if there's one thing I know about veterinarians, it's that you have to be passionate to make it happen, especially in the zoo world.
Yeah.
There's just no doing it otherwise. But it sounds like you've stepped away from that, or I know that you're overseeing, you're partially overseeing that department, however you want to phrase it.
Sure.
But are you still at all involved with doing the actual veterinary work? And how long do you spend in the clinic and all of that?
Yeah. So
hospital
I'm doing a little bit of the clinical side still. Again, just trying to more support that department and what their goals are. But yes, it is a big transition to go from a clinical career more into management. It did feel like a good fit for me. I still feel that way. I love my job. And it's a new challenge. I like challenges. Vet school was probably the biggest challenge. And so that's kind of exciting to keep pushing it forward. But yeah, it's definitely a big change. It's kind of changing the lens from, in clinical medicine, we're really looking at taking care of the collection. And now we're still kind of doing that, but the collection has changed to our staff. Sure. And I think that's great.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, with your education being what it is, it doesn't sound like there was a whole lot of, leadership training in there, or even communications training in there. So what do you do to make sure that you're good at that and to learn that side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as a whole, our industry and profession needs more of that. I was really fortunate. In veterinary school, we had mandatory classes on that. So we had communication classes, we had leadership opportunities. I've been an opportunist for leadership opportunities since high school, and did that in undergrad. Again, it always felt like a natural fit. So I would seek those out and then use them to develop things that I didn't like to. I used to hate doing public presentation. I did not like talking in front of people. And now it doesn't faze me because I've had the chance to practice it so many times and realize why it's really important, right? We have a message to share, so we need to practice that. And was it 2 years ago, I did a leadership course through Gray's, Growing Resiliency for Aquarium and Zoo Employees. And it was phenomenal.
Nice.
So, even though as a career, it's not the first thing you think of, right? You're like, oh, you're being trained in medicine and what drugs to use and how to anesthetize animals. It's so important. Veterinarians in particular, and this goes, beyond just, that's my experiences. I'm a vet. So I talk from that lens, but I think that's true for, curator level and all of that. There's so much of the technical side, but each one of those positions is also leadership. So try to work in that sort of natural development as things arise. So things like presenting at conferences and being on committees, those are all little opportunities to build your leadership skills and your communication skills.
Great answer. Yeah. I'm very passionate about leadership stuff. I think it's wildly important. I read a lot of leadership books and
so important.
Yeah. In my real job, I'm frequently, music directing shows and one of the people in charge on a tour or whatever. And it's a skill set that you really do need to develop. And
absolutely,
and you're right. I think a lot of people don't. And that's cool that you've been so passionate about it. This really seems like you just found your niche here, which I'm really digging.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Great.
Yeah,
I love it here.
So I get in trouble if I don't talk about animals, specifically, at least occasionally on the podcast, as fascinating as you are. So tell me, there's obviously a huge collection here. What is your favorite animal at the zoo? You have to have one. You're not allowed to lie and say you don't.
My favorite animal, species or individual?
Yes.
I love our flamingos.
Nice.
I'm the SSP veterinary advisor for
Very
flamingos, so
cool.
I'm biased. And I've been very fortunate to get to work with free-ranging flamingos in Bolivia with our bird team. So
wow.
I have a strong bias towards that. Love the flamingos. They're a great exhibit animal. They're very interactive. People love them. And they're just incredibly adapted. They're so cool, different. They're fun to talk about. Flamingos are great. Individual animals, oh man, there's so many. There's so many great animals. Who is my favorite? See, now you're going to get me in trouble.
I am. That's the goal.
People are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, interesting. You didn't want to pick my animal? I will say, with the caveat being, one of the first animals that I worked with here that I sort of started to build that relationship with was our silverback Elmo. And him and I just, for whatever reason, I've worked with gorillas previously, and he is a really amazing animal. And he definitely is very aware of what's going on, but he is, from a silverback standpoint, very calm. And so I would come in and be working with a different gorilla and he would just stand by the door and watch, which was really cool that we got to build. And that helped me then build the relationship with the keepers in that building, which is cool, right? To bring it back. I know we're talking about animals. To bring it back to the people, I think those relationships are just as important as the relationships with the animals, and more so, right? Because I was coming in as a veterinarian and they work with the animals all day.
Right.
So I need to have that relationship with them even more than I need the relationship with the individual animal.
No, absolutely. I actually, we're recording this on Tuesday, September 10th. It won't be out for a little while. But today I dropped an episode from Roger Williams Park Zoo. And it is one of my favorites that I have done because it was basically a person who was really into training. And a person who was new to training, but had been a keeper and had a really great relationship, in particular with these two binturongs. And they teamed up and then worked with the veterinary team to completely change the care that these animals were getting and changed their lives in the process. These binturongs are almost unrecognizable now in a positive way.
Yeah.
And when they were telling me the story, I was not there to do an interview. I just happened to meet these keepers who had heard of me, and they started telling me the story. And I instantly reached out to the PR person there who I'm friends with, and I was like, I need to talk to these people. And we did the thing, and it blew my mind. And we spent an entire episode just digging into those steps and how that team worked together and how the vets trusted the keeper and the trainer trusted the keeper and the keeper trusted the trainer. And it really, it's such a beautiful thing when those relationships work out. And I think that sometimes people outside of the zoo world don't think of that. But the relationships that you forge with coworkers, with people in other departments, keepers to vets, whatever, actually have an impact on the care the animals receive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool because our zookeepers are really good at training really good reading the animals. Those are the same skills you need with people, right? Like we like positive reinforcement too.
Oh, yeah.
Operant conditioning works just as well for me as it does for an animal. And so I think getting people to switch that lens to realize I have the skills. I do this every day. I ask, for this behavior, this is the desired behavior.
Right.
These are the steps to get there. You can do that with anyone. And yeah, that's so cool. And it's so, like you said, so important. The people side relationships are, I think, just as important as the rest of it. And it changes the care. Absolutely. I mean, we do some incredible training here, and it's because of that, right?
Right.
The animals trust them, but then they trust each other.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to see, especially when you talk about silverbacks, elephants. I mean, these are not tiny little animals that you're dealing with, and to see those relationships is incredible. Yeah, no, one of the biggest positives that has come from me doing this podcast that never would have thought would have happened is as I learned and as I delved into training and I started learning about training and studying it and looking into the ABMA and interviewing incredible trainers and talking to them. My son was growing up. He's 10 years old now. So this podcast has been around for, a lot of his formative years. We're in our 5th year. And as I learned all that stuff, I really modeled my approach to parenting off of animal training and positive reinforcement. And I don't yell at my kid and I don't do, there are times I'll get frustrated, whatever. No one's perfect. Yeah. But I really, and we have this incredible relationship. And honestly, I'm not sure it would be there if I hadn't learned from, the animal world how to interact so well with this person. And that is something that I'm very grateful for, Yeah, relationships, they really do matter.
It's everything.
Yeah. Obviously, another thing that really matters in the zoo world, of course, is conservation. And you mentioned that you're involved on that side. You're just involved with everything. So can you talk a little bit about the conservation work being done here?
Oh, man. How much time do you have? Yes, I think that the Fort Worth Zoo absolutely does conservation. Is one of the best in the country. It is everything from foundational work with the International Elephant Foundation, International Rhino Foundation, and that, big picture, how do we equip people in the field, all the way to reintroducing Pecos pupfish in West Texas. And it spans all of that. So some of the projects I specifically work with, I mentioned the high Andean flamingos in Bolivia. And so we partner with an organization in Bolivia that does an annual banding for juvenile flamingos at one of the high altitude lakes, which is incredibly beautiful, very remote, very hard to get to. And it is the main breeding site in the world for James's flamingos.
Oh, wow.
Super important site. And so we've been doing the banding for a couple of years now. And last year we actually started including health assessments in that. So we're trying to get some baseline data because just like everywhere else, that environment is being impacted as well. And so we want to make sure that we have baseline so that we can track over time and ensure that this really, really important space is staying safe for them and that they're still able to utilize it. It also has Chilean flamingos and Andean flamingos nesting there. So it's a really unique ecosystem, really cool opportunity. Our bird curator, Brad Hazelton, has actually worked with one of the facilities down there to start developing an assurance population.
Nice.
Because a lot... they don't really exist outside of South America in a managed setting. And so if something were to happen, there's no backup for that. And so we have tremendous flamingo experience here, really talented staff as far as raising flamingos. And so we've been able to partner with them to share that expertise and build some capacity down there. So that's a really cool project.
Yeah, that is cool. Wow.
Work with our Louisiana pine snake program, reintroducing those snakes back onto the landscape in Louisiana, maybe one day Texas. We're doing the same things with Texas horn lizards and Houston toads and Puerto Rican crested toads and Pecos pupfish, and we're getting into freshwater mussels. And I think that is really important to highlight. There's so much work to be done on the ectotherm side of things too. And I think we do a really, really phenomenal job with that. And then we have full-time conservation biologists that work in the Caribbean with the Anegada iguana and the Jamaican iguana. and really drive those programs forward and getting animals back on the landscape.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love the reintroduction or head starting or all of those types of programs. I find those incredible. I was actually surprised, pretty in this world. And I just the other day realized that there's yesterday I found out actually there's a safe program for mussels. I had no clue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on the steering committee of Safe Red Panda, and I did not know there was one for mussels, and I feel kind of bad about that. But
freshwater mussels, so cool.
Yeah.
They're so cool. Very underappreciated, but like fairly complex lifestyle and so important for aquatic ecosystems in North America and everywhere, but like North American freshwater mussels, and they're in trouble because they're sensitive to things in the water and to change how we're changing rivers and all of that. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about mussels just in general? I feel like, because I know you do the conservation stuff. And
Sure. Yeah. I don't have all of the details.
You have enough for a
Talking to
podcast,
someone
I promise.
that will have all the details. But, they have various life stages, and depending on the mussels, some mussels rely on a host fish, and they actually like latch onto the fish. So you have to have the fish present for them to be able to complete their life cycle. And there's so much, I think, that we still need to learn about invertebrates in general, right? Like they are the largest taxonomic group of animals. And we know very little about them, particularly from a health standpoint, but even just in general. I mean, we still haven't named many of them or found them, certainly. And mussels fall in that, they look like kind of like rocks and streams, and people may not even know they're there. But they're filtering organisms, and they help with water clarity and making sure that we have really high quality water, which is something we all need. And so I think mussels are a great opportunity to connect that story, right? Of how does a little clam looking thing in the riverbed connect to you? Like, how does that impact? Well, everyone needs water. Everyone is around water. I think people really enjoy, recreation on water. It's all connected. Those are the stories that we want to tell. We want to get people thinking about conservation with that personal connection. And you can do that with mussels. It doesn't just have to be big, charismatic megafauna. I mean, I love elephants. We do incredible elephant things here. But we also do incredible things with mussels and the Coral Reef Track Project, and maybe less charismatic.
Yeah, and I think that stuff's really important. I think that's very cool. You mentioned a couple of different things that I want to touch on, one of which is going back to flamingos for a sec.
Sure.
In particular, especially with your background and everything, I know that the flamingo exhibit here is very popular. I know that because in the times I have been here, I've never gotten up close to the flamingos. I'm hoping to today, but it's always so crowded that I literally can't get up that close to the birds. Flamingos. It's amazing how popular they are. But I also know that avian influenza is a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's gotten down here or whatever, but how are you taking care of the flock with that situation, and how has that been going for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Avian influenza is definitely a current wildlife disease of concern. And so one of the things you'll notice when you come to the zoo, if you've been previously, is that a lot of our bird exhibits are covered now. So the biggest concern is that wild birds would bring it in, right? We don't have it naturally circulating within the birds that live here. So what we want to do is prevent the birds from coming in and bringing it with them. Meaning, well, of course, they're not intentionally bringing it in, but they may come in and try to snack on some of the food. And so by covering it, we kind of prevent that from being possible. Other things that we do is, manage how we feed them to try to prevent wild birds, particularly waterfowl is the biggest concern, from mingling in with. And we do have ducks in our exhibits, but those are our ducks. So we know their status. So that's been a big thing. And then keeping an eye on what's going around us. So, looking at the USDA data and tracking, it moves with the migration. So birds migrate up north for the summer, and then they come back down in the fall. So spring and fall are the big times that we would be really focusing on it. And they report detections. So we would know if it's in the area. And then we have a staged response depending on how close it is to the park.
Very cool. That makes a lot of sense. Have you noticed? So you mentioned that you're stopping the birds from getting, like the wild birds from getting in, and also from stealing food. Has that made an impact at all on how the flamingos eat or just anything, not having to worry about dealing with other birds around?
I don't think so. They never seem to mind. I mean, they live, all of our flamingos are in a mixed species exhibit.
Right.
So they have some other bird in there with them, which creates a really cool visitor experience, I think, and is, what you would see in the wild. Birds that frequent water tend to share space because water is one of those precious resources. So I don't know that they necessarily noticed. We have noticed, but I don't know that the flamingos have appreciated the big difference.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Very cool. So, elephants. Now, the last time I was here, had Trip on and had a great conversation about elephants, but we can always talk more elephants.
Sure.
In particular, I noticed that there was 4 elephants, tiny elephant out there. So who is that, and how old are they, and all of that?
Yes. The newest one is Travis. Travis was born a year and a half ago, about now.
Okay.
And he was the first calf for our elephant Belle.
Very cool. And it's you've got quite the last time I was here, the new elephant habitat was being built.
Yes.
And Avery was nice enough to actually take me to kind of see it, and I was very excited. But something was missing, which was the elephant.
Sure.
And so when I came the other day and actually saw them living their best lives there, it was very cool.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, kind of as a follow-up just to that episode, how are the elephants doing in this new place?
Yeah, they're great. The exhibit is phenomenal, both from the guest experience, but also from the elephant experience. It's provided a lot more flexibility in how we can move animals around and keep things moving during the day. It's a really enriching habitat for them. They have that beautiful river. They love to swim in it, especially the little ones. But they all get in, but, that's a great opportunity for them. And the way that it's designed, it's really intentionally flexible so that we can create that dynamic movement through the herd. And we have a multi-generational herd here, which is great for the elephants as well. So, Travis is here and he has his mom, but he also has his grandma with him. And the space now allows, movements, and they get to share different spaces and still be on exhibit. We have the amazing demonstration yard where guests get to see all of the incredible care that goes into taking care of elephants. There's a lot.
Yeah, no,
there's a lot.
Well, and I got to see that the other day.
Yeah.
When I was
great.
here, and it was the crowd watching was going nuts.
Yeah, it's such a cool experience.
Yeah.
And to be that close.
Yeah.
Right? Like that really forms that connection when you get to see them up close.
Yeah. No, I have had some seriously cool times with elephants, but even I am blown away just every time.
Every time.
Yeah. So what's it like going, dealing with the care of elephants from the veterinary side?
Yeah. There's a lot, just like from the husbandry side. Elephants are, they're just big. They're really big. And that poses challenges, right? But
fair.
again, to bring it back, it all comes back to relationships, right? Because they're so big, we rely on that relationship they have with their keepers and with us to participate in their own care. And they absolutely do. It's incredible. They're much better at things like blood draws than I am. Very, very patient for that. And it's so important. And so the preventative health side of elephant medicine is really well developed. There's been some really important people that have worked and pushed that forward. And so we have a really well-developed plan here, looking at their health as a whole. And that includes nutrition, which we have as a separate department here, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a privilege. And we have incredible staff that, nutrition is such an important part of health. And that's, more than just elephants, but we'll talk about elephants because they eat a lot. And so we look at that at the big picture too. And so absolutely nutrition is involved in that. And then our vet staff are involved in that. And our elephant care staff, it's all one big team making sure everything is set up for them. And so, yeah, we do a lot on the preventative side for elephants, so that, that's things like vaccines and making sure that their blood work is healthy and all of that.
Yeah, that's very cool. One of the things that really impressed me that Tripp had mentioned was that you guys really don't need to bring in anyone external for, like, a lot of people bring in, an elephant foot care specialist or something like that. And I know, just to clarify to those listening, if something came up, if there was something, you would happily bring in
absolutely
outside help. But like, everything's in-house here.
Yes.
And that's fairly rare for elephant care, because there are people who literally make their living just
absolutely
taking care of elephant feet or whatever, and I thought that was very cool when I found that out.
Yeah.
That was surprising to me.
We have,
even as great as this place is, that was surprising to me.
Very talented staff, and we absolutely utilize them. That being said, of course, we would bring someone in if it gets outside the scope. But, that's true for, again, all three of those. Our elephant staff, our veterinary staff, our nutrition staff, all very capable to handle that. And with that, have developed things nationwide to help. Our nutrition director just helped develop an elephant milk replacer formula.
Wow.
That everyone can use. So that expertise now is being shared broadly, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's very special. So there is a new area of the zoo.
There is.
And would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Or at the very least, would Avery like you to talk about that a little bit?
Would you like me to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
We opened our newest exhibit, Predators of Asia and Africa, in June of 2023, which really revitalized the whole space where our big cats have been, and diversified that area a little bit. So we have some bird exhibits in there, as well as our Sumatran tigers and our striped hyenas. The African lions have a new beautiful big home.
Pause.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this lion habitat, because it is like, okay, so Tripp was showing me around this area the other day, and he's like, that's our lion habitat. I was like, cool. And I looked in, I was like, cool. And then we went to the next viewing area, and he's like, still our lion habitat. And I was like, excuse me?
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, talk about it a little bit. What went into the thought behind it, and how are the cats reacting to it?
Yeah, I mean, the cats love it. We were really excited shortly after they moved in. We had a lion cub, which is great. So he's still on exhibit, although he's getting quite large now. He's quite a big boy. But the idea of the habitat is just to provide that more enriching, varied space for them. And so there's two big grassy areas and then that beautiful waterfall down the middle. And the idea being that this will be a little bit more flexible to work a normal pride dynamic. So potentially, it could change the number of cats that we have. It can also change how we are able to manage them. So there's actually, even what you can't see is there's another off exhibit yard that adds even more flexibility. So if we had another male, there's still outdoor access for them. It's beautiful in grass. It's like a private little getaway. And so I think on the guest side also, our previous exhibit, you had to view them kind of across a decent space. And now they're right up at the glass and watching guests interact, especially with the newest cub, has been really amazing at the new exhibit.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me more about the new place. I just got really excited.
Yeah, it's a beautiful exhibit. And then up above that on the waterfall is our cheetah exhibit and our African wild dogs, and then African leopards. Those are all of and clouded leopards.
Cloudies, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so fun. And then, throughout that we have various bird exhibits. So we have storm storks, critically endangered species. We have hornbills, also species in peril in general, and red-crowned cranes, to try to highlight, the predators are there too, but we think about things as a whole ecosystem and biosphere. So, they're not the only ones living there, but they can be really cool conservation messages, right? And we kind of talk about this a lot with elephants. We focus on elephants, but when we conserve elephants, we're conserving that entire ecosystem. And so you can utilize kind of that messaging to connect the pieces, right? Like a lion doesn't just live in a vacuum in Africa. Like there are also birds that need the savanna. And so behind that, we have an exhibit with a bunch of birds in it. And it's really cool. You can actually see through the exhibit into the lion exhibit to kind of create that visual connection of it's all connected.
Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
beautiful.
love the new area a lot.
Yes.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah. And then there was one other relatively new area. It was new to me anyway. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we opened our Mountains and Desert building in our Texas Wild area earlier this year. And this space was totally reimagined and I think does a phenomenal job of connecting guests with what we're doing for conservation in Texas and in the Texas region, including Louisiana and Oklahoma. And so it highlights some of those species. So now you can see Houston toads on exhibit. We have Texas horn lizards and Pecos pupfish. And it is an immersive exhibit that highlights the mountains and desert region of Texas. And so it's all Texas native species. And again, such an important message of connecting people with the wildlife from their own backyard.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really cool building.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, well done. Well done.
Thank you.
What's next?
What's next?
Yeah.
We are now getting ready to work on the last phase of the Wilder Vision, which is forests and jungles.
All right.
Yeah.
Very
exciting.
cool. Yeah. And when will that be ready?
That's a great question. Do we have a
TBD?
yes?
Even if you
final
had...
timelines are still to be determined.
Fair. Let's be honest. Even if you had the final timeline, it would probably change like 24 times.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just construction is always true.
Yeah.
Cool. So I had one final question before we get to our wrap up stuff. And this, if this makes no sense or whatever, I'm gonna cut it. But going back to elephants for a second, I noticed that the elephants here have, and I've seen this elsewhere too. I mean, this is common in elephants, but especially seeing some of the older ones here. I noticed that like they have some like lack of pigmentation in different places. And I'm a person with vitiligo. And so I was wondering, I always connect with animals that have something like that going on. And so I was wondering what that is. I've never really thought about it or talked about it till I was looking at the herd here the other day. And I was like, oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that pigmentation situation?
So you've probably only noticed it in the Asian elephants. So Asian elephants naturally, as they age, will lose pigment, particularly on their face and upper trunk region. So it's a totally normal process. That happens specifically in Asian elephants. And it is one of the ways that you can tell who's older in the herd. But yeah, totally normal process.
But do we know like why or anything? No. Okay.
Loss of melanin. It's the same mechanism as in other species, but like as far as a ecological reason for why that would happen, I don't think we know. Okay. I just find it, I mean, you connect with animals about all kinds of stuff, but like, when I started to show signs of vitiligo and, my pigmentation, you can't really see it too badly right now. You kind of can there, but like, I felt terrible. Like that just was very, I don't know, embarrassing, even though it's not like a thing. It's nothing I did, Right.
And then when I started to find out that was a thing in the animal world and would see the pigmentation loss in elephant, it just like, I feel pretty because of it. Like, I feel like that's cool. And it's a really meaningful thing to me. I would love to know what the ecological reason is happening to me or them, but hey, whatever. But I don't know. It's amazing how you can connect with such, different, unique ways with animals. Cool. Thanks for that info. I do appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to say about the Fort Worth Zoo or your time here or anything?
You just about covered it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Great. And then conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to?
I think on the veterinary side, the Wild Animal Health Fund through AZV is a great one. And then a lot of our foundational partners. So IEF, IRF, TSA, International Iguana Foundation, the Caribbean Wildlife Alliance, the Zoo and Nutrition Wildlife Fund. I mean, there's so many organizations that are doing great things.
Nice. Wild Animal Health Fund is something that I always promote on this podcast. I am a huge fan of the work they do.
I've benefited from it and I'm a huge supporter of it.
Nice. Very, very cool. Will you be at the conference?
I will.
Nice. All right. Well, I will see you there then. Yeah. Very cool. And then last but not least, it is time.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Yes. I was an intern at Mystic Aquarium, and we were the straining response network for the Connecticut region and into Rhode Island, and actually a little piece of Long Island as well. And so as the intern for any animal that was stranded and found deceased, we would conduct a full postmortem evaluation to see if we could figure out what happened. Was it human involvement? And so for things like sea turtles, you have to make sure that there's no plastic in their gastrointestinal tract. So I was the lucky winner of a loggerhead sea turtle that had been floating at sea for I'm not sure how many days to weeks.
Oof.
Yes, and it arrived like a balloon. And surprisingly, I was the only one that wanted to stay for that necropsy. And it was one of the most memorable smells of my entire career. I can still smell it if I think about it to this day. And the turtle had been eating very well crustaceans that were then cooked in a Dutch oven. So as I was sorting for plastic, I had to take a few breaks. And that is one of the most memorable experiences of my career, for sure. And I'll never forget that smell.
I do believe that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it, and for sharing all of the good stuff and also that.
Yeah. You're very welcome. Thanks for
John.
having me.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of fun, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. You know, one of the things that stood out to me was that multiple times John made it a point to say, you know, that the question I had asked was a really good question. And I'm not pointing that out because I want to show you guys that I'm a really good podcaster. Also that. But no, I thought that was just so interesting because so much of what John talked about was, you know, lifting up people and being a good leader and all of those things. And even though he wasn't my leader in this moment, you know, I thought it was really interesting that he was lifting me up and he was doing what good leaders do. And I really appreciated that. So, yeah, it was so awesome to get to spend time with the Fort Worth Zoo crew again. I really loved being back there after so many years. And it was so fascinating for me to see how much I've learned and how much has changed since I was there last, which was, you know, pretty early on in the podcast. So it felt really cool to be back. And I don't know, it's just, I love it there. If you haven't been to the Fort Worth Zoo, it's a fantastic place. And I highly recommend you check it out, not just for the facility, not just for the animals, but for the people, because they really are an inspiring crew there. They just really are. So, all right. With all of that said, I do want to take a moment to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And to remind y'all that you can become a patron of the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. So with all of that said, I think it's time to head on out. So be back on Friday for Zoo News. Sound like a plan? Cool. And until then, don't forget the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.